Video where we're going to be doing data structures. And then in data structures, we're going to be doing the one-dimensional array, arrays as parameters, two-dimensional arrays, string did I write multiplication? Actually, manipulation, not multiplication. And then we have structs and arrays of structs. And then for classes, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to explain it properly in this video because I haven't really mastered the classes, but it's actually the same, kind of the same thing as your structs. Just in this case, you can have functions. But yeah, let's get to it. Before getting to it, I just want to explain what a data structure is. So a data structure is basically a way of organizing and storing data so that the computer can use it efficiently, right? If you could imagine, maybe books could be piled on the floor if you think of a library, and making them difficult to find, right? So instead, they are organized on shelves by category, if you think of it. So a data structure is like those shelves. It just keeps data organized, and it is easy to use and find. Let's talk about the. Oh, I wrote something here about the data structure. I didn't think I did. Okay, let's talk about the one-dimensional array, right? And before that, I just want us to understand what an array is, and by now you should know what one-dimensional means. Let's just talk about an array. An array is basically a collection of variables that can have the same data type and be stored under one name, right? So it's just a collection of the same variable. In this case, if you check here, I was talking about the marks. Or you can think of the integers, and all of them are marks. They have the same data type, which is the integers, and the variable also is kind of the same. So it's all stored under one name. Basically, instead of creating many variables like this, like you could have int mark1 and then give it a value, and then you have mark2 with its value, mark3 and mark4 with both its values. Instead of that, you could just write int marks, right? And then because here we have four marks or four different marks that we're talking about in this array, an array is represented with this square kind of brackets. So because you have four variables, you're going to have four inside the array, and then you would have all those values in just one line, right? Which basically stores all four marks in one array. Let's talk about the indexes. So basically each element has an or a position in an index. So each element, I'm talking about the numbers or the marks here. So for example, if you have 75, 68, 91, 80, and 56, if you're thinking of index or positioning, you could always start with 0. This would be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? As you can see, we have 5 different values that are in this array or marks. But with indexing, if you're talking about a position or if you want to call one of the elements, you would basically use this positioning, right? Remember, if you're also doing your computer systems or your fundamental concepts of computer science, you would know that if you're doing, let's say, counting in decimals, you basically always start from 0. Or if you're doing your binary numbers, your hexadecimal numbers, or your octal numbers, you would always start with a 0, and that's basically how a computer operates. So this is basically how you would position each element, right? Notice that arrays start counting at 0 and not 1. So this 0, if I wanted to call 75, or I don't know, output 75, I would say mark and then 0 here to be more specific on what I'm calling, basically. Right? An example would be if I'm accessing an element, if I said C out marks and then 2 inside the square brackets, so the computer basically would go 0, 1, 2 is 91. So instead of 68, 2 would be 91, and your output would basically be 91, right? Another example, if you were to go marks 0, so you want to access 0, 0 is 75, so you would go up here and your output would be 75. I just hope you understand that. But because we're going to be basically accessing elements in each example that I'm going to do, I think you will get what I'm talking about. Let's talk about arrays as parameters. So functions can receive arrays as well, which is what I wrote here. For example, what happened with my example? Okay. So this is a function. Remember what functions are. If you are lost, please go back to the previous videos. And remember what a parameter is, like I did explain in the previous video. So do watch that video to understand what I'm basically doing here. Hopefully you know by now what the square brackets mean, and that basically means an array, right? So now an array, or we have a function which has arrays in it, or an array actually. So now if I'm going to call it in the int main, okay, wait, I think let me just explain this once I'm done. Let's say we have int numbers. So we have numbers and we have three numbers, right? But if you think of indexing, you would have 0, 1, 2 numbers. So just be careful with indexing, or actually writing the actual numbers that you have. So positioning is different to writing the actual number of things you have inside the array. And then if I were to call the function or the display and then numbers, okay, let's say you have the return. Oh, so if obviously you have this, right? Think of it. Now I have this function, and inside this function, I'm saying, or I'm giving it or assigning it a job to always produce this or give me this whenever I call it. And now that now that I've said what the actual array is, what it carries, and what values it has, if I call it and say numbers, the computer is going to look up here and see, oh, there's a function of numbers, but of an array, obviously. And then it's going to jump here and check which number or index we want, and then it checks. So the index here is 0, so it goes there by 0 here, and then the output would obviously be 5. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it correctly or to the points where somebody wouldn't be lost, but I think that's the best I can do. So that's how functions can also receive arrays, or we could have arrays as parameters as well. Okay, let's talk about the two-dimensional arrays. A two-dimensional array stores data in rows and columns, like I wrote here. An example that I could give would be if maybe you have int marks, and then rows and columns, remember, and it's also two-dimensional. So I think it does make sense what I'm doing here. So this is your row, and this would be your columns, right? So it could be anything. It could be a row of tables and the columns. It could be chairs. It could be people. It could be houses. It could be anything, right? So it's not really, it could be a matrix as well. So it's not really restricted on one thing. And how you would write it, so different people write it differently. How I do it is I would open a big curly bracket, and inside, remember, um, this means two rows, so I have to have two rows. With my row 1, inside my row 1, let's say I have 50, 60, and okay, not the semicolon, just a colon, a comma actually. So you would have 70 here, right? The second row, let's say it has 80, 90, and 100. And then I close it. Remember, with curly brackets or any bracket that you have in C++, it has to have a partner. So this goes with this goes with that, and this goes with that, right? So this also goes with this goes with that. So you can't have a missing bracket, because obviously you're going to have an error. And I forgot to close this up here. Okay, so let's analyze what I just did here. So it says 2 rows. I have 1, 2 rows. And then it says 3 columns. So I have 1, 2, 3, right? 3 columns and 2 rows. It becomes different, obviously, when you're doing your indexes. Like, for example, if I'm thinking of indexes, remember positioning starts from 0. So if I'm doing the indexing of rows, I would have 0 and 1. And then for columns, I would have this as 0, this is 1, and this as 2, right? So this basically means if I want to access some elements inside this array, I would obviously have to use the indexes rather than what's actually written here. Okay, for example, okay, I think it's here. If I wanted to access marks, so in row 1, or remember now, because we're doing indexing, or now it's in the C out, I don't really have to go to row 1 as I see it, but I have to think of it as indexing. So I'm going to go to index 1, and then for columns, index 2, right? So index number 1 would be here. and then number 2 would be this, right? So where they intersect, that's the thingy that you're looking for. In this case, it's the 100, right? Okay, just think of where they basically intersect. So I'm just going to erase these two. So remember, this was 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. If I go to 1, it's this. And then if I go to 2, it's that. So where they intersect is what I'm taking. I think another way to basically write your array would be, I'm not sure. So let's say you have int mark, and I think we have 2 and 3. If you want to write it in a single line, you you would have your 50, 60, and 70, and then you close this off, and then you have another one where you have now 80, 90, and 100. Close it off, and then close it off again like that. And this basically means the same thing. I think it does mean the same thing. I've seen other people doing it like this, so I think it also does mean the same thing. So in this case, this goes with this, it goes with this and this. And if you're thinking of rows, you basically check your rows like that, right? Okay, on to string manipulation, where obviously I said multiplication, but I meant manipulation. So a string basically stores text, and if you're writing a string, so here instead of having int or integer, you would have string and name, and then to represent that it's a string, you would have those two is it inverted commas or quotation marks, and then your name inside, and then you close it off like that. To get the length of this whole name or my name, you basically go name, because we gave it name, right? So name length, and then you would have those, and then you close it off. Obviously inside the int main, your output basically here would be 6. I think it's 6. So 0, 1, 2. Yeah, I think it's 6. And then if you want to join, or before that, let's talk about the accessing letters. So if you want to access maybe, actually, let me have C out. So you could go name, and then you have 0. If that was an array, you would have 0 like that. And then the output would basically be the M. Though I don't remember if I had capital M. I think it's capital M. And then joining strings would basically be if you have string number 1 and string number 2. If you want to write it in a single line, inside obviously the C out, you would have first plus second. And then you close it. And then the output would basically be hello world. And that's it basically for string manipulation. Okay, structs. A struct is basically a group of different kinds of information that are being put together. For example, if you have this struct and we're saying it's students or student or whatever, and in a student you want the name, the grade, sorry, the age and marks. If basically, because now this is a struct and it can group different kinds of informations together, if I want to create student 1, if let's say I have student 1, that I will name, let's give them the name, or whenever we're calling them inside the struct, we're going to say S1 instead, right? So if you basically want to access the information of the student 1, you would have S1 dots. You have to have the dot and a name. Because the name we said is a string, remember string. Let's say now the name is Masindi. And then student 1 again, the age. So you have to obviously do this for multiple students. And then student 1 again, the marks. Because it's a decimal, or sorry, a double, you have 84,5. Okay, so because of this, you would have a lot of different students. You can obviously have student 2 and assign it different kinds of names, and it can be whatever you want it to be. But for you to understand this better, I think let's talk about the arrays of structs. So sometimes you might have many students. So instead of having to write student 1, student 2, student 3, Okay, sorry about that. You might want to use an array, right, instead of having a lot of different kinds. And I think it does make sense because even with variables, if you have a lot of variables, you might just want to use an array, right? So it goes as well like that with structs. So let's say you have, not sure if I wrote it down. Okay. So let's say you have student and it's a 2D array. So let's say we have 30 and 30. Obviously, if it's a class list, if I'm giving them names and then I also have them their marks or their ages, I need to have 30 by 30. And then let's say within this, now I have the names Masindi, John, and whoever. With a comma, let's say I also have the ages 19. Obviously, if they're in one class, like let's say high school class, they have to be at least along the same ages. So 19 again, 19, 20, and so on. So now, if I'm thinking of structs, I could basically now just go say, or when calling it, I could have class list. And then let's say I have 0 dot age. So can you see how easy this is? And this would basically go to age, right? Because it's a 2 by 2. Let's say age is in the second row. So yeah, let's say age is in the second row. It would go there and check to see what age is. And because age is 0, because that's age 0, I'm going to get 19. And then let's go again to the class list. Let's say I go by 1 name. So it would go by 1 and name and then give me John. I hope you do understand. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it correct to the point where somebody who's lost in the module would understand, but I think I did try my best. And then for classes, I'm just going to briefly explain. I'm not going to write anything, or I'm just going to give examples of what I think a class is or how better to explain what a class is. So a class is similar to a strut, but it contains functions, like I said previously. It's more like simply a blueprint or a template, or you could say it describes what something should look like and what it should be able to do. If you could imagine maybe building a house, the plan would be let me try to draw it here. So if you're building a house, okay, let's use a square. The plan maybe would be, let's say you have a door here, a room here, let's say 3 bedrooms, right? And then you have a bathroom, so bathroom, and then for rooms, I'm just gonna have R's, and a kitchen here, and let's say maybe a garage too, so G, right? So if you're building the house and this is the plan, the drawing is basically the blueprint, which is what a class is, but not the actual house. The actual house would be like an object. So you could use the same blueprint to build maybe house number 1 here, and house number 2 here, and then house number 3 here. Obviously, if you are a developer, you can build those houses with the same blueprints. So a class, just like a struct, where with a struct you have a lot of different informations, and you could use those different kinds of informations to do different things, like different names, different ages, different marks, and stuff like that. A class is quite similar to that, but now you'd also have a function that's being called. And I think that's it for the video. Thank you guys for watching, liking, and subscribing. Please continue to do that for the other videos that I'm going to be posting. Hi, once again. I just wanted to do a special shout out to the BET program, or Bokamoso Trust program, and also the South Deep Mines / bursaries and the Gold Fields. Thank you so much for all the wonderful things that you do for your students or your learners. It was a wonderful time that I had there, and I can see everybody else who's still there is having a wonderful time. May you please continue doing this for everybody else. And yeah, we appreciate the help. The teachers, I miss my maths and physics teachers so bad, but yeah, thank you so much.